Good morning, everyone. Today we will discuss the topics of ebooks. Books. This is my partner. It's Lule and it's Li Shen. And my name is Huang Dani. Now, first, Lule will discuss.
Now let me introduce the first part. The first part is the history of books. It's including 5 parts. Part A, the invention of character. Part B, the material of the books. Part C, invention of printing. Part D, the content of the books. And Part E, conclusion. Now it's Part A, the invention of character. The history of alphabetic writing goes back to the consonantal writing system used for Semitic language in the Levant in the 2nd millennium BCE. Most or nearly alphabet scripts used throughout the world today ultimately go back to the Semitic proto-alphabet. Its further range can be traced back to a proto-Sinaitic script developed in ancient Egypt to represent the language of Semitic-speaking workers in Egypt. This script was partly influenced by the older Egyptian hieratic, a crucial script related to Egyptian hieroglyphs. Many through Phoenician and Eltamatic, two closely related members of the Semitic family of scripts that were in use during the early 1st millennium BCE. The Semitic alphabet became the ancestor of multiple writing systems across the Middle East, Europe, Northern Africa, and South Asia. Some modern authors distinguish between consonantal scripts of the Semitic type called abjads and true alphabets in a narrow sense. The distinguished criticism in the lateral alphabets constantly assign letters to both consonants and vowels on an equal basis, while in abjad each symbol usually stands for a consonant. In this sense, the first true alphabet was the Greek alphabet, which was adapted from the Phoenician Latin, the most widely used alphabet today. In turn, derives from Greek. Here is the development of Chinese character, which is quite different from Western countries. Chinese characters have evolved from Jiaguwen to today's characters over a long process. Jiaguwen of Shang Dynasty is a group of Chinese characters that resemble drawings. In the Shang Dynasty and the Western Zhou Dynasty, there were also inscriptions of birthwork called Zhongdingwen, which also resemble drawings. After the first emperor of Qin Dynasty unified China, he also unified Chinese characters and introduced Xiaozhuan, a very beautiful style of characters. Since Xiaozhuan script was very time-consuming, people of Qin further simplified the characters created a new style, Li Shu. In the Han Dynasty, Li Shu including another type of calligraphy, Cao Shu, followed by Xing Shu became the main general typeface. The official script broke away from the pictographic element of ancient Chinese characters, laying the foundation for Kaishu. Kaishu came into being in the late Han Dynasty and was based on Li Shu. After Kaishu appeared, the block-shaped Chinese character were finalized. Kaishu has been used for since. Kaishu is standard calligraphy that has been used for the longest period of time. Still today, for the students in Chinese schools, they are required to write the Chinese characters in Kaishu as a regular script. The following is the material of the books. As books have now reached in the 21st century, with the creation of the increasingly popular e-book format, we thought it would be a good idea to take a look back at the long and involved history of books. From the clay tablets to the e-book format, the book has enjoyed a remarkable evolution. Presented here is a snapshot of the history. First, Sumerian tablet. Current understanding stress that the very first attempt to transcribed symbols onto movable materials were an ancient group of people known as Sumerians who lived in southern Mesopotamia around 3500 BC. Mesopotamia is an ancient name for the area in the Middle East that stretches from the Zagros Mountains in the northeast to the spurs of the Taurus Mountains in the northwest, and the Persian Gulf in the southeast to the Iberian Plateau in the northwest. The Sumerians devised a cuneiform alphabet, which is a system that consists of logophonetic consonantal alphabet and syllabic signs, the symbols of which were attached into clay tablets with a triangle-shaped stylus called a calamus, and then allow the dry or fried in a kiln to make them last as long as possible. The Sumerians are believed to be the first people to ever use a cuneiform script, which itself is the earliest known writing system in the world. Second is papyrus scrolls. Papyrus is a very thick paper-like material that is made from the piece of papyrus plant, a reed-like swamp plant that used to be found in abundance along the Nile River. This piece was cut into thin strips, pressed together, and then glued and dried to form a thin flat surface that could be written on. Again, a calamus cut from the stem of a reed, and then sharpened was often used to scribe by bird feathers were also used. Third, after paper was invented, everything was changed. It is generally accepted that a Chinese eunuch named Cai Lun invented papermaking for the intention of writing and used a combination of mulberry, bark, hemp, old rags, and even used fish nets for creation of the paper pulp around 105 AD. In 868 AD, the very first book is printed on paper in China, using a block of wood that had characters carved in reverse relief. Ink was then placed on the block of wood to create a print of on paper. This technique is known as block printing, or more accurately in this case, wood block printing, and was originally used as early as 220 AD as a means of printing on clothes. With the development of technologies, the material changed from paper to online. The very first e-books were produced way back in the early 1970s by the Gutenberg Project. However, it wasn't until the turn of the 21st century that this format became generally available and accepted as a publishing format. This was led by a novel by Stephen King called Reading the Bullet, which became the first mass-market electronic book published in 200 AD. Within the first 24 hours of release, the novel sold over 400,000 electronic copies, which broke the publisher's severe and led to fans having to wait for hours before they could download a copy. Despite its success, the e-format was not seen as commercially valuable by most publishers first, not helped by a lack of any standards and portable reader technology. In 2007, the Kindle becomes the first e-book reader. Now, let us move to the part C, the invention of printing. A Chinese man called Bi Sheng came up with a very first movable type, with each letter created from wooden pieces and then placed onto a wooden board. This wooden method was not without its problem, however, the more serious of this being the ink sunken into the wood and creating an uneven surface. As a result of these issues, wooden movable type was quickly abandoned and replaced with schematic tablets. which made from black clay. Due to the complexities of the Chinese written language, movable type didn't really catch on for quite some time in the East. The invention of movable type in Europe by Johannes Gutenberg led directly to his major work, the creation of the Gutenberg Bible. This was the very first major book to be printed using Gutenberg's new movable type printing press and marked the start of the Gutenberg Revolution and the dawn of the printed book. In 1476, William Custon set up England's first printing press. Now let's move to the part D, the development of the book's content. First, we all know that the tales of legendary were passed down from generation to generation. Then, with the characters were spread by more and more people, some short articles like poems were born. In the middle of the 5th century BC, the Greek sage movement happened in Western. Protagoras who proposed that man is the measure of all things, puts man at the center of society in the world. At the same time, in China, during the spring and autumn and the warring states appears, the contention among the 100 schools made the content of both change. In order to control people's behavior and ideology, the imperial power of authority carried forward the different denomination, doctrine, and even alleged that they are on behalf of the gold. So this time, books content moves to the Confucianism, Quran, Catholicism, and so on. First, in the Renaissance, like Dating, Divine Comedy, which revolved at the corruption of the church and the darkness of feudal rule. And the Baroque, the first come up with anthropology against theology, the father of humanism. And there are some other changes of the content of the books, and they are the representatives. In Ming-Qing dynasty, the evolution of Ming and the Qing dynasty literature concept make us secular life become the focus of novel increasingly. The object is according to a real life. Then through the families, marriage changed, the ebb and flow of empires, to reflect the social relationships and show the prevailing outlook. The Enlightenment is aimed at guiding the world out of the traditional doctrine, irrationality, blind faith, and despotism. The cultural critics, religion skeptics, and the political reformers of this era and the pioneers of enlightenment, but they are just loose, informal, unorganized collections. Now, you can find almost everything, whether good or bad. Now let's ask what enjoying a video.
About 10,000 years ago, in Samaria, which is modern-day Saudi Arabia, the book begins its journey as a clay tablet. The Samaritans needed a way to keep record of crops and livestock, so they began making clay tablets to write on. It is a simple form of writing that they invented called cuneiform. They used sticks to write on the tablets, and then they would leave them out in the sun to harden. However, there had to be a better way.
Did you make another one?
This better way came around 3500 BC in Egypt. The Egyptians had developed a more complex form of writing with pictures called hieroglyphics. They also invented a type of paper to write on. This first form of paper was made from a tall reed that grew along the Nile River, called a papyrus plant. Papyrus became the major industry for the Egyptians, and they began to export it. But this new business, Greece, was their best customer. The Greeks began to make scrolls out of the papyrus. The scrolls were lightweight and easy to carry. Since Greece was the world capital of learning in those days, scrolls made it easier for scholars, teachers, and others to carry important information with them. The Greeks also invented a form of writing. It was an alphabet of 24 symbols called letters. Around 146 BC, the ever-growing Roman Empire conquered Greece. They too helped the book progress. They wrote on thin wooden boards, which they punched holes in and tied together. This wooden book became known as the Codex. In order to write in these new books, they applied wax to the wood, allowed time to let it dry, and then the writer would scratch the letters into the wax. These wooden books were soon replaced by ones that had papyrus pages, thus making them even easier to use and carry. Today, codex is the technical term for any book made up of multiple pages bound together. We can thank the Greeks for this new progress. Next, the use of parchment or stretched animal skin made the book even more like the ones we use today. The skins were bleached and rubbed smooth. There are many advantages to using parchment. It was less likely to tear, ink could be erased if needed, it could be painted, and you could use both sides of it. This form of the codex, with parchment, was the first version of the modern book. In regards to the book, the Chinese were writing on palm leaves that had been flattened. These flattened leaves were then fashioned together like a fan to be read. The Chinese wanted a better, more practical material though, and they finally found it when in 105 AD the world's first sheets of real paper were invented. With this paper they made books that were written by hand. Eventually they developed a printmaking method called woodcut, which made illustrating and making multiple impressions on the same page easier. Because of this new paper, the Chinese changed how they made books. They began to glue the pages together and fold them accordion style. During the Middle Ages, bookmaking occurred in small Christian communities called monasteries. Monks began to create handwritten copies or manuscripts of the works that had survived from Greece and Rome. They worked in rooms called scriptoria. Most of their copying was of the Bible and other religious material, and it was a very time-consuming process. Around 1100, monks began making illuminated manuscripts, very beautiful and colorful hand-copied books. However, the demand was growing for books, and the monks' slow process just could not keep up. Others began to make quick but not as attractive manuscripts to try to keep up with the demand for books. But it wasn't until around 1450, with the invention of printing with movable type, that things began to progress for the book. Johann Gutenberg invented the printing press in Mainz, Germany. Many copies of a book could be made now at the same time as one could be hand-copied. By 1500, printing presses were in 300 European cities. This made books more available and affordable. For the first time in history, books were plentiful, and ordinary people could now have access to books, and this spurred an intense desire for learning. All books printed before 1501 are called incunabula, meaning cradle, signifying the infancy of modern bookmaking. At this time in the book's history, most of them contained a title page, page numbers, table of contents, and index. In the 1800s, the first paperbacks were published. They were called dime paperbacks, and they were very popular. The book industry was booming. Modern books still resemble those books made hundreds of years ago. However, children's books have evolved and now include pop-up books, cloth and plastic books, and books that make noise. The newest type of books are e-books. These books can be read on the internet or downloaded to a special handheld device. Regardless of how they are read, the resiliency of the book has proved unbeatable, bouncing back again and again.
Here is a timetable about books history. If you are interested in it, you can see the PPT after class. According to the above, It's easy to find the difference between Western and Eastern countries, but now, even the future, in my point of view, it will be more and more similar. It's universally acknowledged that books are treasure banks storing wisdom passed down from generation to generation. Books' history is quite complex now. Welcome Huang Danny to introduce the next part.
And then let's go to part 2, ebooks. I think this part is very easy to understand. The first part, what is ebooks? As you can see, ebooks is an electronic books. All the words and images are in digital form. An ebook consists text, images, or both of them. You can download ebooks in an online shop, and you can read them on electronic devices, such as Kindle. You can buy the e-reader and ebooks in Amazon.com, and then you can read it whenever you want. And then let's look at the second question. What are the advantages of ebooks? First, lightweight. As it's natural, comparing with the physical books, e-readers are much lighter, such as Kindle. It's only 400 grams. And e-reader is definitely a lot more lightweight, and physical books is a lot more heavy. If you are traveling or just on the go, you want to bring your whole library with you, or just to bring your e-reader in your bag. Obviously, you will trust the ebooks. And then let's talk about the convenience. An e-reader has a booklight, so you can read it at night. And when you have the impulse to read, you can buy the ebooks in the online shop whenever you are. Wherever you are, at school, at home, in office, you just need to move your finger, look through the book list, and choose the book you want, and start your reading. But you must be careful that you need to make sure that you change the ebooks enough before you're reading. And then let's talk about the third, more choice. For example, in a bookstore, your choice is determined by the bookstore, because bookstore may not have the book you want, but if it is in the online store, it will be different, because you can search it in the internet. Internet is amazing. It's easy to find the book you want. So this is the reason why you have more choice when you use ebooks. First, user can annotate page. For example, if you find a word you don't know, you don't understand it, you can search it in an electronic dictionary right away. If you find a good sentence, you can highlight it or make a mark or copy paste it. Fast. Lower price for long run. Ebooks are much less expensive. If you buy 100 ebooks, it's much more cheaper than buying 100 physical books. 6. Large capacity. In e-reader, you can store more books, just like a library, online library. Okay, let's go to the next part. What are the disadvantages of ebooks? First, the piracy behaviors. Do you know what is piracy behaviors? It's just like a book thief stealing the book of other people, and by copying them, pasting them. It's easier to steal the books than physical books. Second, eye strain. It's easy to make your eyes tired when you look at a book for a long time. Third, reader's concentration becomes fragmentary. Because e-reader has more fiction, such as message push, and sharing a link to attract people's attention. This is why you may lose your attention when you look at books. Now let's watch a video.
E-books versus printed books. Which is really better? Prepare for round one. Let's talk about features. According to 68% of young adult readers with devices used for reading, a person can read any light information, adjust text size, highlight text for later reference, store a lot of books in one device, and carry it anywhere. Books offer a physical aspect that an e-book doesn't. You can flip through its pages and directly write notes on the book itself, giving a more natural experience. Round 2. E-books and printed books fight for the ease of use to readers. According to 66% of young adult readers, printed books are better. First, they're eye-friendly. Second, they give a more fulfilling reading experience, which connects readers to the book. Lastly, it doesn't require power. E-books, on the other hand, are the opposite of these reasons, which make it difficult for them to read. Also, they cause eye strain. Round 3. Let's talk about the cost. 86% of readers who have devices find e-books cheaper than printed books. There are also free e-books on the internet, which is also one reason why they choose to read e-books. Printed books just cost more. Round 4. Let's talk about learning and comprehension. According to an interview with young adult readers, all of them retain information longer when they read in printed format than on digital. They may read faster with e-books, but find it hard to recall information compared to paperback. Round 5. Let's talk about the accessibility of both formats. Readers have listed 3 characteristics that they love about e-books and printed books. E-books are convenient, store many books in one single device, and can be read anytime, anywhere. While printed books are said to be authentic, flashy, and collectible. Round 6. Let's talk about the feel and utility aspect of books. 66% of readers said that printed books offer a different experience. It gives a real and authentic feel, nostalgia, and satisfaction among them. It's the smell and the way of curling up in a good book while flipping its pages that an e-book can't offer. After 6 rounds, the judges have already made a unanimous decision. And the winner is both e-books and printed books. E-books and printed books have their own characteristics, and they differ from person to person on which one to use. It ultimately depends on the personality and own preferences of a reader. It also depends on which format best serves a certain situation. Printed books or e-books? Which side are you on? Share your thoughts using the hashtag BookWars.
And then let's go to the next part. What's the effect of ebooks on physical books? First, the traditional publishing industry is under threat. Second, the number of physical books readers are gradually decreasing. Because more and more people choose ebooks, less and less people choose physical books or just they don't read. Third, it's easier to cause the privacy behaviors. Because physical books can be scanned easily, be uploaded to the network. First, physical books also have the ebooks version. Because ebooks have a lot of readers, physical books publishers also publish the ebooks version to attract people. And now we go to another topic. Part 5, Modern Book Selling. Blockbuster syndrome. Book publisher focus on bestsellers, high volume sales. They use crazy advertisements to attract people, and most of them has no interest in lower selling books that even they are still profitable. Superstore and online websites crowd out the independent book sales.
Hello everyone. As we have known something about the books, now I'm going to talking about the influence of books. And I will discuss it about individual, which is about the influence for each person. And then I will talk about the influence of group and social. Before we talk about individual, I hope you guys to think about what's the most important book you've ever read. Maybe you have a certain answer, or maybe you have read so many books that you don't know which one is the most important for you. All of you can find that there are some books really changed your mind. That's because the books we read can shape our lives. And the question strikes at the heart of our sense of self. The sociological questions that lie behind what might be called the origins of the literary sensibility are a great deal less easy to answer. How do people learn to read? How do they fashion their own individual tastes? How do they establish why they prefer one type of book to another type? Where do they acquire the information that enables them to make these selections? And, having acquired it, what do they do with it? After all, there are no hard and fast rules about aesthetic and choice and how it operated. Anson Powell said that books have odd effects on different people. For people, the books not only tell them knowledge, but also give people a kind of sense of identity. People may feel that he wrote this for me, he knows all about me, and they will get information from the books more easily. For those of us who read a lot, it is just a matter of time before we come across a book that changes our thoughts, affections, or behavior in some way. Over time, reading naturally becomes a life-changing experience. I love the quote from Joseph Epstein. A biography of any person ought to deal at length with what he read and when, for in some sense, we are what we read. What is we are what we read means. Here I will give an example. Lisa Boo, who had given a speech in TED named How Books Can Open Our Mind. And this picture comes from her video. You can find the video in YouTube. In this speech, she showed her experience about how books give her courage and dreams. And she said, I found my role model of an independent woman when Confucian tradition requires obedience by reading Jane Eyre. I satisfied my hunger for partner's advice from correspondence in the family of Lule by a family of writers and musicians. And I learned to be effective from cheaper by the dozen. Books have given me a magic portal to connect with people of the past and the present. I know I shall never feel lonely or powerless again. Having a dream shattered really is nothing compared to what many others have suffered. I have come to believe that coming true is not the only purpose of a dream. Its most important purpose is to get us in touch with where dreams come from, where passion comes from, where happiness comes from. Even a shattered dream can do that for you. So because of books, I'm here today, happy, living again, with a purpose and a clarity. Most of time. So many books be always with you. So this is our part A about individual. And here comes my second part, the influence of group. It has 2 points, family and school. Now we start from family. In fact, books not only influence you but also influence other people. In family, the number of books may influence the children. Plenty of parents are no doubt wondering what they can do to boost their children's academic performance. Newly published research suggests that it's a simple and effective answer. Build up your home library. We find that books in the home have a positive payoff in improved test scores throughout the world, writes a research team led by University of Nevada Reno sociologist Maria Evans. The relationship is strong, clear, and statistically significant in every one of the 42 nations. And this research also shows that regardless of how many books the family already has, each addition to the home library helps children do better. And now here comes the second point, school. As you can see, reading books can influence other people, such as classmates. Books help to make the reader more empathic. They make us more sensitive to other people's emotions. So, books may influence our ways of communication with others, and it can influence our ways of treat classmates, roommates, and even workmates. For students, the knowledge we learn from teachers ultimately from the books that teachers have read. When teachers encourage students to read, we are given access to the gift of influence. And now I will talk about the part C. Social. It has 3 points: interpersonal, copyright law, and people ideologies. Interpersonal. In the part B, we have talked about books make us more sensitive to other people's emotions, but books that we read can also indirectly influence the lives of others. This has been happening since the advent of the printing press. For example, a book about Marco Polo's travels influenced Christopher Columbus to attempt reaching Asia by sea via and the westward route. As a result, many Americans get a day off every October to celebrate the discovery of America. At the very least, bank employees get the day off. It is also were inspired to think about the vast yet personal influence books like the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah have had in the lives of countless numbers of people. The books not only influence people, but also influence the law. Just as my partner said, in all ages, people's mind became more and more free, and the printing industry has been developing. In this background, more and more people began to write things to express their views, protect writers' rights become important. So, in 1710, the world's first copyright law, the Statute of Anne, enacted in England. This act introduced for the first time the concept of the author of a work being the owner of its copyright, and laid out fixed terms of protection. Following this act, copyrighted works were required to be deposited at satisfaction copyright libraries and registered at threshold. There was no academic copyright protection for unpublished works. But it is hard for everyone to publish the things they write, and people from different countries has different law to protect their article until 19th century, which caused many problems. So, in 1886, however, the Berne Convention was introduced to provide monthly recognition of copyright between nation-states and to promote the development of international standards for copyright protection. The Berne Convention does away with the need of registered works separately in each individual country and has been adopted by almost all nations of the world. Following the United States adoption of the treaty in 1988, the convention now covers almost all major countries. The Berne Convention remains in force to this day and continues to provide the basis of international copyright law. One of the biggest changes implemented by the adoption of Berne Convention was extend copyright protection to unpublished works and remove the requirement for registration. In countries of Berne Convention, this means that an individual or the organization they are working for owns the copyright of any book they produce as soon as it has recorded in some way, be it by writing it down, drawing, filling extra. This is about how books can influence the law. And at last, I will talk about how books can influence the people's ideologies. For example, in the book Uncle Tom's Cabin, books in 1800s, how Uncle Tom's Cabin helped start a war. Roseanne's character Temple became the most popular book in the 1800s until Uncle Tom's Cabin was published, written by abolitionist and preacher Harriet Beecher Stowe in 1852, 9 years before the beginning of the Civil War. Uncle Tom's Cabin was a smash hit by any definition, an expression critique of slavery that tugged on readers' emotions. The novel sold 300,000 copies in its first year and became the century's second best-selling book after the Bible. Stone's novel has been credited with heightening tensions between the North and the South. As the books can influence people's thought, it can ultimately influence people's thought about social and politics. Does fiction affect policy? Yes, of course. So is all fiction public? To my mind, yes again. Fiction writers who claim their writing is not published are simply writers who seek to dissociate themselves from the public, furthered by their writing. Making up stories is an inherently politic act, just like voting, and like choosing not to vote is too. And as a conclusion, let's watch a very short video.
It is the question time. Part 1 have 4 questions. This is the first question. Which one is the first true alphabet?
Go ahead and just give us the answer. We're kind of running a little late, so just go ahead and don't make them try to guess. Go ahead and give them the answers.
And the second question, who set up England's first printing press? Yeah, it's correct. And third question, when was the paper revolution? Yeah, it's correct. The first question, which one was the aim at guarding the world out of the traditional doctrines? It's correct. And this is the part of ebooks. Which of the following statements is not true about the advantage of ebooks? And the second question, which one following statement is not true about the impact of ebooks? Anyone? Yeah. It's very easy. And third question, which of the following statement is not true according to the presentation? Yeah, it's correct. And this is the question of the part 3. Which one is the not true about the Uncle Tom Corbin? Anyone? The correct answer is boy. It was written by Rawson. And the second question, which one is true about the first copyright law in the world? Yeah, it's correct. This is it's our reference. Okay.
That's all.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Sania and I'm from Team 4. And for now I will explain about humanity in the Age of Manuscripts. So the introduction. The idea of manuscript first emerged in Plato's time and place, which is in Greece for around 400 BC. At that time, philosophy and writing was not something new, but to practice philosophy in writing is new in Plato's era, and Plato didn't think the writing can be used to practice philosophy, because Plato wrote, once a thing is put in writing, the composition, whatever it may be, drifts all over the place, getting into the hands not only of those who understand it, but equally of those who have no business with it. It doesn't know how to address the right people and not address the wrong people. So a philosopher can fight back against an attack in a dialogue context. But once their words are put in writing, they cannot fight back, because it's like people see this is your words, this is what you say. You cannot deny what you say. And then many people wrote for the sake of power and fame. In the hands of elites, writing became a most effective instrument of power. So at that time, rulers cannot stop people from talking, but they can control the writing and its meaning, so it's resulted in hierarchical societies. So why we write? Before the manuscript cultures, there was the speech cultures, but speech cultures left very little to us, so we have to rely on inferential method. Inferential method means that there was data available and we have to take a conclusion by ourselves from the data. But from manuscript cultures, it left much more to us and we can rely on primary source. Although the sources are very few in the beginning, but it keeps growing in number as the time goes on. So this is what our ancestors do before writing. The first is they develop symbols, then they are hunter-gathering, and then they're food producing. The symbols is developed around 300,000 years ago. It is possible that Homo erectus and early Homo sapiens possess the core capacity that stands behind all writing, which is the ability to associate graphic signs with thoughts to symbolize. There are some proofs that they are using symbols to symbolize something. The first is they are collect pieces of red ochre to be used for some symbolic purpose. They also carve a rather nice minimalist design into an ox rib, and they are also using shells with holes to be used as ornaments. Then they turn into hunter-gathering, which is developed around 12,800 years ago. It was the time when the Natufian, a new kind of human culture, began to emerge. So at that time, the earth became warm, and it creates a good hunting ground. So they are hunting, and they take what they got to their homeland, and they just settle in that. Their homeland now is known as the Jordan River Valley. But after that, around 10,300 years ago, they turn into food producing, which is in Holocene period. It is developed by the successors of the Natufians, which is the Neolithic farmers. They shifted their energies toward agriculture and animal raising. So at this time they planting crops and raise some animals. The plants they plant such as wheat and barley, and also the animals they raise are goats, sheep, and pigs. They also build permanent villages, and one of them is Jericho, which is founded about 9,600 years ago. So this is the kind of writing they used before. Now we are using the words known as modern alphabetic scripts. The first they are using symbols, then pictographic writing, abstract numbers, logographic scripts, phonetic scripts, and finally modern alphabetic scripts. So the first is symbols. The language at that time enabled the Neolithic farmers to cooperate, particularly in the production of public goods such as leadership, security, and spiritual care. But this publication of goods created two important and novel consequences, which is social ranks and tax. Social ranks was held by princes and priors who supplied the public goods, while the tax was gotten from the beneficiaries of the goods. So, for the first time, the humans found a good reason to make symbols systematically, which is to keep accounts. So they make the symbol, which is named as tokens. So the tokens grew in the context of the early agricultural village. It created because Neolithic people needed a system of counting in. So one physical symbol represents one physical item. Like from the picture we can see that there is the token which represents bread and also wall, sheep, and many other things. They repurpose an old technology rather than inventing a new one to be used as tokens, such as clay trinkets which had been made by craftsmen for thousands of years. It began in Mesopotamia around 10,000 years ago. It is employed by princes and priors. It became the marks of high status because sometimes the tokens was found in rich graves. It fell into more than a dozen categories depending on their basic geometric shape such as cones, discs, cylinders, and into additional subcategories depending on their markings. It came to stand for many different sorts of goods, such as grain, oil, bread, cakes, animals, and many other things. And it was used for some 5,000 years until it was replaced by writing. So the next is they developed the pictographic writing. This idea came because the amount of tribute an early city like Uruk handled put additional stress on the token system of accounting. So in roughly 3,700 BC, Mesopotamian accountants began to place tokens into clay envelopes in order to create archival records of transactions. But it is not convenient because the accountants couldn't learn what they contain without breaking them. So they began to impress the tokens into the envelopes before they harden. But the accountants eventually realized that the impressions on the envelopes made the tokens inside of them redundant. So they replaced the envelopes by clay tablets with token impressions on them. So the picture there is the clay tablets, and they are using the stylus to carve the symbols on the clay. And so they create a writing system known as cuneiform by 3100 BC. After that, they develop the abstract numbers. They make the abstract numbers because the token and impress tablet system were manifestly inefficient in terms of both space and computation, particularly when dealing with large numbers of goods. Because one token is represent for one item, so when you have to measure 10 10 items, you have to use 10 tokens. But how if you have to measure 100 items? So you must use 100 tokens too, and it's inconvenient. So they create the abstract numbers such as the letter X, it stands for 10 items, Y for 20, and Z for 30. So after that, they developed the logographic scripts. The idea that writing could be used to represent words was novel to the accountants of Uruk, because at that time they lived in a world which used pictures to symbolize anything. But once they discovered that writing could be used to record speech, they developed the logographic scripts, which is associating existing pictographs with spoken words or by inventing new symbols for words. But the problem is, a rich logographic script has tens of thousands of arbitrary symbols, and each of them must be memorized, such as the Chinese characters and hieroglyphs. So to make it easier, they make the phonetic scripts. It is a different writing technique that makes it possible to recognize what word a particular symbol stands for with much less effort, or at least memorization. And they create the phonemes such as the pictures, which is a unique symbol to represent each of the sounds that make up all words. We can see the symbols like in the picture usually in English dictionary when we search for some particular words. Then beside the words we see the phonemes, and it helps us to know how the word supposed to be read. And finally, they develop the modern alphabetic scripts. Like the modern alphabetic scripts is the words we now use for communicate. It is originated in Egypt in the early 2nd millennium BC. But for the next 1,000 years, this alphabet was little used. But eventually it gained favor among the Phoenicians, who then spread it around the Mediterranean basin, and it was adapted to local language such as the Greek language. So the writing and human nature. Humans took a very long time to develop writing, some 175,000 years. Why they took so long time to develop the writing? So we know as the failure of literacy. The first is prince and priors attempt to monopolize reading and writing. The prince and priors think widespread literacy is quite dangerous. Such as we know, they don't want their people to be cleverer than them, so they control all the writing. The second is literacy training, not to mention the equipment necessary to read and write, were quite expensive in almost all manuscript cultures. So the prince and priors, they make all the tools to read and write quite expensive by limiting the supply. And humans by their nature don't like to read or write. Sometimes we also feel like this. When we see a text, we sometimes feel lazy to read it. So what the manuscripts did? Writing did not in any sense replace talking, but it supplemented talking. As we have seen, only a small minority of people in the manuscript era could read or write. It must have been the case that most of all human expression used for whatever purpose remain oral, so orality survived and affecting writing. So now we will talk about the effects of writing. The first is accessibility. Writing and reading are expensive because, as I said before, the prince and priors limiting the supply, so the price for the tools is expensive. And if finally you can afford the tools you need to read and write, you have to learn to encode and decode. It means that the writings in the past was in the form of picture. So if you want to learn about the writing, you have to know what the pictures mean, so you have to translate them, and it is not easy. Because literacy is not accessible, it create concentrated networks. It means that only a portion of this community will be literate and fully on the network, and the rest will not. Such as I said, only the prince and priors know about literacy, and the people are not. Concentrated networks will create a hierarchical social practice. In this social practice, assets are scarce and fixed, so humans will attempt to monopolize them. And if successful, they will use their unequal control over assets as a basis for unequal power to form ranks. The next is privacy. Writing and reading has a high privacy, because if you are careful, you can use writing to communicate anonymously to a restricted circle of correspondents, so they will not know who wrote it. When writing and reading are used privately, they created segmented networks. In segmented networks, information flows within the segment but cannot easily flow between segments. And because of this, it creates closed social practice, which is it tends to anonymize and remove from public view. The next is fidelity. Writing has a low fidelity because what goes in is sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, and what comes out is sight and encoded sight, which is known as 5-to-1 code. The example is when we are reading a book, we cannot see the characters, but we are imagining them. And because writing has low fidelity, it creates symbolic networks. The symbolic networks made what was invisible became visible, what was simple became complex, and what was concrete became abstract, such as oral laws and myths could become so long and complex until they surpass the limits of memory. But written laws and myths could expand almost infinitely and reach remarkable levels of complexity. So, because it has symbolic networks, it creates a conceptualized social practice. In this social practice, princes and priors use writing to conceptualize social practice in law codes and sacred myths, and it creates idealism, which is a doctrine that writing was a divine gift that linked humans to the all-important unseen world, because the people back then believed that writing was brought from heaven. The next is volume. Writing has a low volume. The capacity of a medium to carry information is determined not only by the typical length of message, but also by the number of people who receive them. And in the manuscript era, not very many people can read manuscript, because besides the literacy training was few, and it is also caused by there was no technology to copy the manuscript, because at that time all the copying was done manually by hand. So it's very hard to copy a manuscript and to be read by all people. Because writing has a low volume, it creates a constrained networks, which means that the number of size of packets of information moving between nodes is quite limited. And literacy in the manuscript era was a scarce resource and had to be used carefully. So it creates a doctrine known as asceticism, where people agreed that writing certain kinds of things was immoral and reading them dangerous. So they think some some manuscript should not be written or read. The next is velocity. Writing has a low velocity. You cannot produce, transmit, or consume a text very quickly. So, it creates monologic networks. In these networks, it is hard to exchange information rapidly. But because it is hard to exchange information, it takes you hours to write a short letter. Then the post office needs days to deliver it to the recipients, and then more hours for the recipient to read it and draft a reply. So it is very slow. Because it has monologic networks, it creates a centralized social practice. It tends to concentrate power in the hands of the sender rather than the recipient of a message. And in the manuscript era, it is where the elite spoke and the unlettered must listen. So the people cannot give any opinions to the elite. So they have to listen what they say. And the next is range. Writing has a high range. It can be transported over long distance with little loss of information to a moderate number of people. And a long-range media created extensive networks. One people can be far apart, cover a large area, and unite many people. And because of that, it composed of several different parts, and particularly ethnically different parts. So it creates a diversified social practice. And because of that, they create pluralism. In pluralism, people are more likely to encounter strangers. The next is persistence. Writing has a high persistence. If you record something on reasonably durable medium, you can rest assured that it will be around for a while. Such as a book, you can still read it after a few years and it still have a good quality. Persistent media give rise to additive networks, where the data was accumulated. And in this network, notes in the present are in kind of dialogue with notes in the past, such as we can read a document from 2000 years ago, and it's the same as we read someone's words from 2000 years ago. And the additive networks create a historicized social practice. In this social practice, it lengthens people's time horizons to such an extent that the past, present, and future become distinct. And because it has historicized social practice, the cultural value it makes is temporalism. In this temporalism, the idea of the past, present, and future form a continuous, measurable, and observable strip. And the last is searchability. Writing has a low searchability because written text is hard to search. Why it is hard to search? Because if you want to search for it, you have to access, and sometimes you don't have the access. And the text usually have to be searched serially, meaning you look at items one after another until you find the thing you want. Books have index and libraries have catalogs, but the index doesn't go very deep and the catalog doesn't get you inside the books. Because writing is hard to search, it creates unmapped networks. In these networks, it tends to generate experts and expertise. So it's only experts that could read the manuscripts. And so this table is the summarize of all the effects of writing I have mentioned before. So the conclusion is, writing was started in manuscript culture, where people back then was using symbols in accounting system. Then the symbols evolved into the alphabets that we see today. And we also know that although writing has started in manuscript culture, not all people in that era were able to read and write, because writing and reading were expensive, and those were controlled by prince and trias. And the next is the questions. The first, which writing system that has tens of thousands of arbitrary symbols and each of them must be memorized? Also, the answer is D, the logographic scripts. The second question, what is the doctrine which says that writing was a divine gift that linked humans to the all-important unseen world? No one? So for the answer of this question is is B, idealism. And the last question, why did writing have close social practice? A? Not A. Yeah, C. Yes. Okay, that's all from my presentation. Thank you.
As I said, I appreciate Shania taking that on by herself. Very courageous of her. This next week, we will have Team 6 will be talking about humanity in the age of print. So that'll be from the Poe book. And then Team 7 will be talking about newspapers. So we're still, in a sense, staying in the writing age, but now with the we kind of started out today. I got the two presentations mixed up, so I should have presented first, but then obviously we talked about the books. So we've already talked about entry into the print age, but we will get Poe's perspective on it next week. Could Team 6 be ready for Monday? Is Team 6 Monday okay for you guys? I'd like to put these in different days so that we're not on the same day. It gets kind of a little bit long. So Team 6 to present on Monday, and then Team 7 on Wednesday, that would be best. So hopefully, I'm seeing some nodding of maybe, hopefully. So preferably, we'll from now on, let's try to have the earlier team. You may not be basically it's the even team in most cases. So 6 would be on Monday. The next week it'll be Team 8 on Monday, and the week after that it'll be Team 10 on Monday, so forth. So until we hit by a holiday or something, I'm not sure where those are at. The teams with an even number will be on Monday. A couple of things real quick. Now that we are getting the quizzes into the PowerPoint properly, and they're in pretty good shape, as I mentioned, I want to make these available as your participation grade. So I'm going to start creating some quizzes, and so you can look for a quiz on Lule in the next few days. Like as I said, it'll be worth less than a point. But it'll replace by and large, my calling your name out and asking you in front of everybody if you know the answer to such a question. So probably a little bit easier for you. It will be timed, it will be short, so you have to kind of prepare a little bit ahead of time. Since you're being given the questions, I might change the questions a little bit, but you're going to, in most cases, if the questions are pretty good questions, I would be using the questions that the presenters provide you. And so it should be really easy for you to get these grades, but I will put it on a timer so you don't have time to go look up every answer. You have to kind of, you should do that ahead of time. Okay, any other questions or problems we need to address? Just a couple of seconds here. We're also, I think, as with Shania with her presentation, we're starting to understand a little better these attributes of media, and so it'll be a little easier for all of you to kind of comprehend what we're talking about when you're talking about these attributes. Whether or not we totally agree with them, again, I may disagree with this whole process to some degree, but nonetheless, we're getting the idea of what he means by these different words, by accessibility, privacy, and these different concepts. And so you did a good job of going through each one and telling us whether it was low or high, or why it was low or high. And for those teaching out a full book, that's the kind of thing we would expect you to do now to help us understand why Poe thinks these different media have different attributes. I think I've said before, but let me kind of emphasize again. I think one of the important things that we will see is that, and again, it's not just Poe, but in our discussion to some degree with the Clay Shirky, part of what he said in his video was that here in this last of the ages of communication or media, we're seeing that everything's converging. We should be seeing here, as was mentioned again by Shania, that it was like 175,000 years before we started developing written speech, so to speak, written text, with an alphabet that we would, that was not a symbolic in nature, but that they could write out in more of a phonetic way. 175,000 years. Think about that in the age of man. Now we're down to 175,000 years have passed, and now we're down to these last 7,000 years of mankind. So from the time they developed an alphabet, 175,000 years before that, 7,000 years since that, approximately, or a little bit less. I can't remember exactly the time when that was developed, but maybe even a little closer to 5,000 years. But where just a few thousand years, a lot has happened, is the point. And with each of with the development of each of these media, civilization has speeded up in its ability to progress. I mentioned before that part of it was previously the lack of institutional memory, we could call it, institutional in the largest sense, in the sense of all civilization. There was no institutional memory in all of human civilization until those 5,000 years ago or whatever. And that made a huge, huge difference in what civilization could be. Again, you go back to that time, 5,000 years ago, what was humanity like? And they were still just barely, some of them, they were barely getting into kind of agricultural age during that time. So they're starting to develop a little bit, but still, like the Native Americans, a lot of people still today, there are some groups of people that are still just hunters and searchers. But back before the alphabet, a much higher percentage of mankind were still in the hunting stage. They had not developed a civilization that included, let's stay here in one place, let's have a home, let's grow our crop, let's have some permanence someplace. Like I say, it still grew in popularity and is not 100% even today. There are still groups that don't have a permanent home. But you see that rapid change as then we went from the manuscript age and into the book age, where now we had something that everybody could access, that almost, maybe not everybody, but most of mankind could have some access to a book. They still, in the early ages of print, a lot of people still could not read. One of the breakthroughs in America was that everybody, basically the increase of literacy was very rapid compared to most parts of the world. And so part of the democracy, the democratization of America, was not just who could vote, but who could read, who had access to school and so forth. And so part of the American dream, so to speak, the rapid advancement of the economy there was basically human resources. When I was teaching in Kazakhstan, I had a PowerPoint there that compared Kazakhstan to America. In basically Kazakhstan, in a sense, is America in 1830. Kazakhstan has about 20 million people in it. It's a huge country. It's the ninth largest country in the world. It has great resources, but they're not very high economically in the world's ranking. So what I try to point out to them is why. Do they have the potential to become, as a country, achieve the American dream? America 1830, huge resources, 20 million people. What happened after 1830? Part of it was the education, and certainly Kazakhstan has the ability to provide good education. One of the problems with Kazakhstan is that one of the things that made a difference is in America, it just opened its doors and said, everybody come. Anybody who wants to be part of this revolution, so to speak, of humanity, if anybody who wants to be part of democracy, who wants to have the opportunity to own some land and own their home, and you're willing to come risk your life for it, because it was literally risking your life to go to America in the early years. You're risking your life to take the ship across the ocean. You're leaving the rest of your family behind. You might never see them again. You were going to a country where if you were accepting free land, it was free land where perhaps the Native Americans were going to shoot you with their bows and arrows or whatever. They're going to burn down your cabin and kill your family, scalp your head, whatever. It was a scary place. There was not much law and order. The dangers were not just the Indians, the so-called Indians. There were also other, the Caucasians, others that were wanting to take what you had, what you were, and there wasn't much law enforcement. The living conditions were very brutal. A lot of the areas where they were living, it was very cold, and here you were isolated out there by yourself. You weren't close to a community. But they were willing to take that risk. I come to believe that it actually created a kind of almost a new race. The very fact that there's the division of people, the people who were afraid to go to America, who didn't want to go to America, who wanted the safety of Europe, and those who were willing to risk their lives to go to America. Created almost a new race. I think even genetically possibly. But it was very, yet at the same time, you had the diversity where people were coming from Germany and Great Britain, the Netherlands, eventually from China, from all over the world. People were converging and creating an extremely diverse race at the same time, if you want to call them one race. Anyway, so my point is this: they opened their doors in Kazakhstan. And a lot of the Eastern countries are afraid to open their doors. They don't want diversity. We want to keep our race and our culture, like it is. One of the big dangers to Japan is because of that, and because their population is aging very rapidly. Japan, according to one analysis, is almost they're doomed. If they don't open their doors to immigration, they do not have enough young people to support the aging population. And so one analysis said they'd have to increase their taxes by 250% to keep their current social programs and their current demographics. It doesn't work. They couldn't do it. And so Japan is going to have a very serious decision to make here. Do we allow immigration? What is the option? They're going to be a very poor country if they try to maintain, take care of their old people and not allow immigration because they just don't have enough young people to do it. So anyway, my point is there are lots of things that did democratize America, and part of it was learning, and part of it was the openness to just let the culture develop on its own, a totally different, diverse culture with people from all over the world, and not be afraid, not be protective of an established culture, because there, in a sense, wasn't an established culture. There was a different culture in different states. One state would be created by one religious group, for example, another by a different religious group, another by nobody that was religious, just people from a certain country. So there was the different states, the 13 original states in America were created by different groups with different cultures, different backgrounds. And part of their decision when they won their independence, of course, the War of Independence brought them together. We want to be free. Now we're free. Once they got their freedom, now what do we do? And originally they tried to stay separate. They had a confederation instead of a federation. They didn't have a strong central government, and they found that wasn't working. So then they said, okay, do we really want to be one nation truly? And that's when they had to pass a new constitution, and they gave rights to gave power to a central government. They're still a little bit hesitant about that. But anyway, so my point is simply that part of, there's different aspects of how an entire world then has kind of moved on from that point. Democracy now is an accepted value almost throughout the world. Whether or not countries really have a true democracy is something else. Sometimes they use that word and they don't really have one. Or they may have a one-party system. And sometimes we in the West condemn a country with a one-party system, but the one-party system actually has a lot of politics going on within that party. In Kazakhstan, it's pretty much a one-party system. But there's a lot of politics going on within that party. Even though they've had only one president ever, there's a lot of people in the government that do not follow that president. And they're trying to go different directions, even though they're supposedly in the same party. So a lot of stuff going on. But you see, again, going back to media, that all this has started happening. All these questions, all the science, all the technology, all the economic growth has happened as the media has developed. And with the emergence of the media, new opportunities for economic growth and changes in civilization. And until now, when we start talking about the postmodern era, we're talking about an era when that is the most free thinking of all eras, where people question everything. And maybe more so in America than anyplace else. Basically, they don't trust anything. They don't trust the media. They don't trust the professional media. They don't trust the government. They don't trust universities. They don't trust big business. They don't trust anybody. Very independent thinking now that they have access to all this information. And yet they don't, in a sense, you don't agree with anything. And all this information, they don't agree with anything. It's kind of a strange world we're in. But anyways, so it'll be interesting as we follow the different attributes of these different media to watch the development. Meanwhile, think about the development of humanity during that period of time. That's one thing that Poe's trying to do is trying to help you understand media have impacted humanity in very powerful ways during the development of different media. And we'll hopefully understand and see that. Okay, thank you. If you have any problems, anybody needs to talk to me, come on up. I'll be here.